Alright, Oklahoma, now you're all geared up and ready to go. Can't say I hate that little dance you do. It's probably my favorite little thing I know you do. The other little thing you do is also pretty cute too. I guess you're really quite the cinnamon roll, aren't you? Anyway, I need to get your sister geared so you're both ready for your sorties later. You know, now that I think about it, I really don't know much about your sister. There's not a whole lot of things I really know her for. I wonder what kind of things I can learn about her.
The amount of times I got her is
what's going on? Oh god.
Number one.
Oh god.
No.
No. Alright, I know I made that joke recently on a Fun Fleet Formations video, but I could not help it when I saw the comment for that. Anyway, in case you aren't sure yet, we're covering the common sisters from the Eagle Union, USS Nevada and Oklahoma. Now, in case you're wondering how to acquire them, well, you're going to get them without having to try. You want that shiny little SR on the limited build pool? Too bad.
Shonen.
All range jokes aside, I'm pretty serious on how easy it is to get them. There's a reason Nevada gets so much flack in her comments. Which brings up another thing. God, the difference in treatment between Oklahoma and Nevada can be definitely something to behold. Most of the comments for Oklahoma talk about how cute and adorable she is, with the occasional mention to her in the builds, whereas Nevada is split pretty evenly between people reading at her in the comments and some kind of Fallout New Vegas joke. Or Yorokobe Shonen, that's a different story though. Anyway, we're covering them today, and as our common rarity battleships, can they truly stand out despite being at the bottom of the rarity totem pole? Let's take a look at their kit and see how they do. Also, since there are no other commons to compare against, we'll be comparing them to a more familiar face from the Eagle Union, USS Pennsylvania. Now both Nevada and Oklahoma share a near identical stat line, so let's compare them against Sister Penn. Starting off on the survival side, both of them are a bit lower than Pennsylvania on HP. It's not much of a difference to be a major concern though. Now they both are heavy armor, so while they have a decent tanking ability, they will suffer a bit from battleship AP rounds as well as torpedo attacks. So keep that in mind when fighting enemies with those particular weapons in play. They both match in their evasion, so they're just as likely to dodge enemy attacks as Pennsylvania. Keep in mind though that evasion being low is normal for a backliner, so this isn't something unusual or anything. Lastly, their anti-air is a tad bit lower than Pennsylvania, so they'll be a little bit less effective against enemy planes in both shooting them down as well as taking damage from them. Of course, pairing them with the Sandy will be an easy fix for this issue, so it's not too concerning, right? Just use the Sandy. Easy. Anyway, not a bad start, as the slight differences could really just be due to them having a weaker rarity. On their offense side, both Nevada and Oklahoma sit a bit below Pennsylvania in terms of firepower. This will mean that they do a bit less damage up front when firing their weapons. Their reload sits in the similar situation, barely below Pennsylvania as well. Granted, this difference is minimal, at best, and won't have a major impact in the long run. Now, they'll be a tad bit weaker in offense thanks to their lower firepower, but it can also come down to their equipment. Going further into it, both of them will acquire 2 additional main gun mounts and secondary gun mounts, much like most battleships do. As for their efficiencies, they actually end up tying Pennsylvania completely, with their BB guns, DD guns, and anti-air guns at 130%, 200%, and 100% respectively. This just means that Pennsylvania will have a tiny leg up in damage output thanks to her having a slightly higher firepower and anti-air stat to work with. Now compared to Pennsylvania, we can see the stat line is mostly just showcasing the difference in rarities between the 3 of them. These overall differences aren't too drastic, so Pennsylvania doesn't have a massive advantage against them. Even when we look at Oklahoma and Nevada's stats at level 120, we do see some pretty solid spikes in both their health and firepower. It's definitely handy for them to have, but these jumps are still going to be a bit below Pennsylvania, so it's not like anything really changed in the comparison against her. The last thing to mention is what separates both Nevada and Oklahoma in terms of their stat line: luck. Nevada has almost double Oklahoma's luck, which will help her in a few areas shown here. So if you have to use one, well, Nevada does kind of have that advantage. Pennsylvania still somewhat wins between all 3 of them, but of course that could change depending on Nevada and Oklahoma's skills. Now both of them have a lone skill called Vice Defense, which gives them up to an 8% chance to reduce the damage taken by 50%. This skill only procs when they are taking damage, so if things work out perfectly, you may never see this skill proc at all. Even then, there is still a very high chance for the skill not to proc, and it's almost like they don't have a skill in the first place. Nonetheless, it is a very, very solid damage control skill, but the low proc chance of the skill isn't probably something you want to shove your RNG luck into. If anything, some of you probably would prefer it went into a don't pull Nevada or Oklahoma during an event 10 pull luck instead. Which, even if that works, you're probably gonna pull the county class instead. Sadly, this skill is a defensive skill, and it won't give them the leg they need over Pennsylvania. However, we're not done yet, as they do get a solid retrofit added to them. This retrofit does give them some decent stat boosts, but aren't really anything serious to them. If anything, it's a balanced stat increase for them overall. What's actually interesting is that it's a decent enough boost that it allows them to be on par with Pennsylvania herself. The rarity jump of the retrofit puts them on a nice even playing field with Pennsylvania, so it could be worth it to look into investing in it. Sadly, it honestly gives Pennsylvania less reasons to be used since both of them do beat her in oil cost. Granted, that's if one oil makes a huge difference for you. Poor girl. However, both Oklahoma and Nevada gain a retrofit skill called Focused Assault, which gives them up to a 30% chance to do double damage with their main gun. Now, this will only trigger when they fire their main guns. To be honest, double damage is no joke. It can seriously hit hard and put a nasty dent in an enemy's health. Its proc chance is still a bit low, so while it may not happen often, it'll definitely be noticeable when it does. Overall, Nevada and Oklahoma find themselves in a similar situation. They fall victim to the "there are better ships to use than them" argument. Their retrofit does help them a bit, but the overall balance tweak it gives doesn't really help them stand out that much. At the same time, they do carry a very low cost for a backliner thanks to their rarity, and can definitely help if you're looking into a lower cost fleet for farming purposes. Their stat line when retrofitted is still somewhat solid, and their retrofit skill they will get helps out a lot with damage if need be. They definitely are not the best, but I think they are still far from being counted out for good. Lastly, well, are they a mob or a boss fleet backline? To be honest, I can't really recommend them for boss unless you are severely overleveled against that particular boss. They don't have the most stellar damage output and their skills are not that likely to proc at all. I'd definitely say they're great for a low-cost mob fleet though. Decent damage output from them and a lower cost will definitely be good to consider for a mob fleet if you're looking for the long grind. It's worth looking into if you're wanting to save as much oil as possible without sacrificing your firepower too much. At the end of the day, both of them are still really solid ships to work with, even if they are far from the cream of the crop. And of course, I'm sure they have their waifu points, so maybe that'll sway you a bit. And that'll be all for Nevada and Oklahoma. Hope you enjoyed it and that it will help you in your future endeavors. Up next, let's cover some Germans. So you know what? We'll be covering Admiral Graf Spee and her sister Deutschland. So look forward to their video when it comes out. Now, whether you're a regular viewer or a patron supporting the channel on Patreon, thanks for watching and I'll see you guys all again real soon in the next live stream or video that I do. See ya!